Alright, we got one package, same as the one that kind of was here last week. It's opening stupid way, so I guess I have to edit that part out. Okay, good to know. So first up, it's wrong to pick up Girls in a Dungeon, Season 1, Steelbook Edition. I have not been picking up all the Steelbooks, but this is to show that, no, I'd say it had a good enough first season. They definitely had moments after the first season that were pretty great. So I don't know, I feel like it's worth picking up the Steelbook. Region A. Should be an English dub there. Yeah. And then ODDTAXI, which as far as I could tell was anime. Let's not crash it into the thing, but audio's English and Japanese. I think this is a movie. One missing girl, any missing pieces. Interesting curiosity. It was hard to tell what to think about it from a distance, I guess. Close enough. Both disc loose, so let's be very careful about putting these all back in. Disc 2. No, those are episodes. 1 through 7. 8 through 13. Regions A and B. Well, very straightforward. Anyways, here's this week's Physical Anime Collection update. Alright, let's start getting through the list of stuff. So with my Friday friend, we're continuing him catching up on Rising of the Shield Hero Season 4. This is me rewatching it. So we watched episodes 3 through 5. You know, it's a good pausing point. So if you have to watch in batches but you can't watch the whole thing, first 5 episodes are probably a good first batch. I'm not sure what the beginning of that would be best. What would be best there. But I think once you get to episodes 3, 4, and 5 are definitely good to watch together, I think. Trying to remember where episode 3 ended, but you know, once again, rewatching this, I kind of get back to some of my thoughts I think when I first watched it, and yeah, it really is something where the pacing feels a lot better. The focus feels a lot more relevant to our main character, and while this is a bit of a development for Atla and Full? Blanking on if I'm getting the name right or not right now. Ugh. I hope I'm not getting it wrong. I don't know. At least when it comes to Atla, it feels like development she has is supposed to be more relevant to Shield Hero because she's, well, declares herself to be his shield and stuff like that. And I don't know. She's kind of a really well scientifically engineered character, I think. Which, you know, is interesting because I've never had complaints about the character designs of Rising of the Shield Hero, because if anything, my complaints have been that some of the characters are a little too perfect and thus potentially feel a little patronizing or something like that. So, you know, in that regard, it's the same. The only other really different thought I had this time relating to, I guess, the contents in these is, I guess the things that has happened don't feel like they're perfectly executed. I mean, the pacing is definitely a lot better. I think it's not the pacing. I think it's just that the ideas didn't flesh out. The idea for Full and his growth through these episodes, it's like, I feel like the right pieces were in place and they were moved right, but somehow the impact still isn't quite there. again, better than the previous 2 seasons. I don't know. It's interesting rewatching it again, but anyways, Campfire Cooking in Another World with My Absurd Skill, Season 2, Episode 1. And I think it's a fine step back into it. I do appreciate the fact that the very beginning of this episode begins with, let's do some cooking. Because this show had cooking stuff happen in it. I think the slime's name is Sui. It's still the most adorable thing ever. And that says a lot because we also have Gatherer's Adventure and Isekai this season, and B doesn't feel quite as adorable. And I have thoughts on that. Why that is. We'll talk about that later. For this one, we got the first episode. We got them showing up. We got this set up for probably an interestingly eccentric character they're going to meet. We'll have to see if it feels like it means anything or not. And yeah, I need to lean down. I had this pointed too low. Too late to readjust it. Anyways, all in all, I think it was a good return to form. I think the new character they introduced is okay. I'm still not entirely sure what to think about them. And I don't know if I want to talk too much more about them because I don't know if that's spoiler or not. But, they're not as cool as Fenrir, and they're not as adorable as Sui. They're somewhere in there. I guess we'll just have to see if it does interesting things with them, but it is what it is. We'll just have to see. Alright, we got episode 3 of Hero Without a Class, Who Even Needs Skills? And it's just doing stuff. So this is the third episode, so this is the point where we have to say, well, what is a series evaluation? It doesn't seem to be doing anything special. I don't think you need 3 episodes to figure that out. You can probably figure out from episode 1 and the way it's executed that, yeah, it doesn't seem to be, it doesn't seem to be leaning on a purpose, which is unfortunate because it almost would be good enough for that. There's material there they could really work with, but otherwise, I don't know. I guess he just fought some people and it's interesting stuff, but while there were neat elements to it, like him picking up an opponent's strategy in the middle of the fight, just because he was so used to picking up that sort of stuff, that was okay, but I don't know, I guess the problem is, theming wise, it doesn't seem to be rising to the occasion, and it's an idea that could be born, that could have birthed really great themes. So it's unfortunate. Oh well. We had the first episode of The Dark History of the Reincarnated Villainous, and it was fun enough, but its premise, we'll have to see how it continues, but its premise kind of leaves something off. So, like, the fundamental premise is our main character was reborn as the villainess of a story she wrote 10 years prior, of one where she was resurrected as the heroine. And the problem is she's reborn at the right time where her true downfall begins, and she has to remember just enough in order to not be the one who gets assassinated, basically. Executed. Not executed. Assassinated, that's a better way to put it. And all of that sounds fine, and some bits and pieces of the first episode are actually pretty good in that regard. But I think the main issue is, as it continues to set up for the next episode, there are 2 problems that happen. One of those is characters are being stupid and saying things. And, to a certain degree, I think it's not as egregious as it sounds, just because I think these characters are what middle-aged her would have made. But the other one is the premise of the show, she has to remember the details. And this is the problem I think you feel in this first episode, where it's like, these aren't details she's failing to remember. This is basic fucking plot. It'd be like forgetting that Star Wars begins with Darth Vader invading the Rebel ship. And that's Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. And, you know, you don't necessarily have to remember every detail of that scene, but you kind of remember it begins with this big space battle, boom, 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 and it's exciting, and the stormtroopers are in there, and then Darth Vader is introduced, and, you know, it's an introduction to a major character and a major plot point, and it's like, any of the details, what did he say, what were the orders, how many stormtroopers were there, you know, nothing like that is really important to that, but she's having trouble remembering some of these macro, okay, yeah, this would be the point in the story where, such and such main character would have been killed, and how could I forget that? Now, to be fair, there's an element of it where, you know, it's been 10 years, she's a different person than she was when she was a middle schooler, but at the same time, I still feel like the anime shouldn't be about her remembering super fucking huge story beats. It should be details about them that allows her to do something notable, I guess. And we'll have to see how it goes after episode 1, but that is how it is. You know, off to a strange first start. Maybe not bad. Let's see, we had episode 3 of May I Ask for One Final Thing. And I think it was an okay enough episode. Again, there's elements of it that are should-we, but there's elements of it that are definitely the show leaning onto its fundamental premise that are just fun. We didn't get a whole lot of our main character just beating up, but we still got it. It's still not only a part of her personality outside of her action-y moments, but it's also you know, it's you know, there's action moments, and then there's her personality. So, yeah, so far fun. I don't think I'm expecting like the greatest things. I'm just hoping for something that just continues to actually be fun as it goes along. You know, just have her have different excuses to unleash here and there. So, yeah. My gift level 9999 unlimited gotcha, episode 2. I don't think I really like this episode. So I guess the idea is episode 1 kind of set up the setup, and episode 2 is kind of setting up, alright, now here's the state of things. But the problem is it's introducing a lot of eccentric characters out of nowhere and spending a lot of time in the lore. And to a certain degree, it kind of reminds me of Underground Healer. But I don't think it's as damaging as the first episode of that one, because that one began with introducing 3 ladies. It's like, okay, well, these are kind of the main active members of his harem. He has the passive Lolly character and the Ghost. I don't remember if they introduced the Ghost. I call her Ghost. She's actually a Wraith. But they introduced the Lizard Man girl, the Orc girl, and the Lycanthrope girl, and can't help but feel that all 3 of them are fucking waste of breath in the first episode. You know, it's a very damaging first episode to that one. This one, none of the characters are quite like that, but it just spent a lot of time just showing eccentric stuff. It's just like, well, okay, I guess these exist, but it feels like the show introduced an idea in the first episode, and the second episode isn't really about that idea so much as it's just kind of dragging things along, so that episode 3 is where it actually starts addressing that directly. And this is important because it's like, okay, they want to establish that our main character has lived in the bottom of this dungeon for years, and using his skill has constructed his own little civilization. And it's definitely a little weird that, you know, not unexpected, just weird feeling that everybody's basically kissing his ass when it hasn't really shown us, okay, yeah, he's the one that provides for them. Instead, it's more like he birthed them, and they, you know, you kind of wonder, are they the ones doing all this stuff? And we don't actually get to see a whole lot of that. Well, I think not one way or the other, and, you know, it's fine. But it doesn't feel communal so much as it feels, again, weird. But, oh well, episode 2. It's not necessarily without promise. Let's just see what episode 3 brings. Wild Last Boss appeared, episode 3. Very action-y episode. Neat.
I'm not sure what I think about it theme-wise, but I do feel like certain elements of it feel like they walk back certain things they were doing in the previous episode. Not that any of their choices are nonsensical. But yeah. Kind of fun episode. Just, I'm not sure that the show has given us something that I feel like I know what to feel going forward. Oh, well, weird stuff. Fine. I feel like I typed one of these things in wrong. Banished Court Magician aims to become the strongest. Episode 2. I think explained a little bit more about why the main character's somewhat nonsensical things from the previous episode were here, but I feel like the problem is, while it does show him able to do stuff and maybe damage from elements not even outside of the ones we saw in the previous episode, but rather the implied history behind that, I think the problem is we're told that he's a genius, but I still have no fucking clue what that means in this show. And maybe that can be the excuse that they can't show it yet. But at the same time, the problem is right now it's doing a lot more telling than showing. Yeah, he cast some interesting spells and did some interesting stuff and had some dynamicness to him. But it's like, I don't know. We don't know what is capable. At least something like, a power fantasy show is like kind of doing the opposite. They really want you to know just how awesome and overpowered this character is, so they'll be like, yeah, I've achieved level 3 magic. Huh? You're not at level 10? And y'all know I'm referencing Overlord with that, or something like that. So, this one's kind of on the opposite of that spectrum, where it shows people doing stuff, but it's really hard to tell how much, I don't know. It's hard to feel the character and their supposed amazingness, I guess. And the first episode does that in a weird way, but oh well. All weird stuff. Tales of Wedding Rings, Season 2, Episode 2. Okay, I guess. I think we learned some interesting history backstory. I'm not sure what else to think about it, especially where it's going. Because, it's definitely... the first season was like this too. It leans a lot into the erotic side. Spicy side. Feels like Season 2 is doing some of the same stuff. I'm going to be a little bit curious where it goes from here, but I don't know. I guess there's some stuff set up, but... I don't know. It's okay, Season 2, I guess. Spy Family Season 3, Episode 2. I was a little worried I wouldn't care as much for this episode. But, because it's really easy for Spy Family to kind of feel like it gets distracted by telling really neat little sub-stories. Sometimes they're pre-story setting up for an upcoming one or consequences of one that happened afterwards. But sometimes it's like, okay, well, we're in Season 3. When are we getting something that feels like it's relevant to the main plot? And I sort of feel like this episode actually gave it to us in a way that didn't feel like it was going to be initially. Something that I think that's been hinted at, and now it's exploring it, and I think it's actually been a very interesting exploration. So, next up is the one that I'm pretty sure that I typoed wrong, because I said To Your Eternity Season 3. I have Episode 3 written down here. It's obviously only Episode 2. I think fun stuff. If there's any complaint about Season 3 so far, it's not having an idea of what the purpose of this is, which is interesting because Season 1 kind of doesn't have that. Season 2, maybe, I think it did. But I think Season 3 is still in its setup phase, where it's pretty clear, okay, and they even tell you, this is the thing that opens the door. But just the character interactions, quite fun. I think it also serves a really good reintroduction to a lot of these characters, because if you're like me and you haven't watched them since Season 2, It's not that you don't remember them, it's that you don't remember until after the fact. It's like, oh yeah, that guy, and they did that thing, and wait, who's that person again? Oh yeah. Fun stuff. Man, fun. I think it was just a fun episode. I've also developed the thing where it's like, okay, every time I watch To Your Eternity, Season 3, I have to be doing it while drinking some boba. Now, I don't necessarily need to be drinking the whole time. I just won't start it up until I'm done brewing up some boba tea of my own and then drinking that while watching the episode. Granted, there's only 2 episodes so far, so who knows if I'll keep that up. Probably I will, because I usually drink at least 1 tea a day. And if it's too late in the evening, like right now when I'm recording this, I'll brew a tea that doesn't have any caffeine in it. But anyways, I digress. Gotcha. Kuda, episode 14. I think the opening changed. I think it was the same season 1 previous episode, so this is maybe the official start of the second core. You know, 2 core something or the other. I would have to double check to see if it was supposed to be 26 episodes or not. Maybe it could be 25 episodes and this would still be a core 2. Maybe the previous episode didn't. I think I commented last time that it felt like a sort of ending, transitionary episode. And as for the contents of this one, it's okay stuff. I think it's moving forward with, excuse me, what it's doing. And I'm just mostly worried that it's, like I've been this entire season, whether or not it's staying on task or if it's getting too distracted by its own world building and characters. I don't remember the Doctor. So, kind of a funny observation. Next up, Dad is a hero, Mom is a spirit, and I'm a reincarnator. Episode 2. It's okay. I think the main problem right now is, you know, the title of the show is from the point of view of the reincarnator, the daughter, but it's still unclear to me what the relevance of that is going on. Like, I would think that the title should be, I'm a hero, my wife is a spirit, my daughter is a reincarnator, and I don't know, and I didn't know it. Which would be really confused, because then that would kind of imply he didn't know that his wife was a spirit. But, you know, the point is, so far it's more about him and stuff, which makes a little bit of sense from the point of view that, you know, he's got the unresolved stuff to deal with, and maybe that's all about setting stuff up. But the relevance of our main character having her power that she does, being a reincarnator, it's kind of not there. There's just her reactions in a couple of places and her discussions in a couple of places, and you know, it's neat. It's not as pretty as the first episode, but it is kind of weird. Anyways, we got episode 3 of A Gatherer's Adventure in Isekai. So, trying to evaluate this. I sort of feel like this show has things it does, because like this is just something a character needs to do. But I don't feel it's as egregious as some of the other ones I've commented on before. Like, it still has elements of it that are fresh, but it's just sort of like, I don't know. There's some elements of it that feel kind of surface level. Sometimes it's still things like, okay, now that our main character is leaving, the entire village is walking him out. And there's some elements of it that feels like, it feels like he's the most important character in the village, even though, while he's done neat stuff, he wouldn't necessarily be. He would have just been well loved, so why does this feel like a village sending off their hero when I don't quite. And it's possible it's not what they were doing, but, you know, it sort of feels that way, and so it feels a little off in that regard, I guess. But, yeah, I think the main problem is they've introduced the character of B, and B is cute, but it feels kind of like an artificial kind of cute. And some of my thoughts looking at Sui again in Campfire Cooking in Another World, I think some of it is... Well, first of all, the fact that B says B, 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 it's like a fucking Pokemon. And, you know, in some degree, in some ways, Pokemon just kind of feels artificial for doing that. and this would be the Pokemon anime, of course, because the video games don't do that a whole lot. It's iconic, it's neat, it works, but at the same time, I do have to say that sometimes it feels like it detracts when it feels so just artificially constructed and put together, I guess. The rules for when B is hiding, how well B can hide, and all that stuff feels a little strange, inconsistent maybe. Like, it feels like it's there to be cute with the main character, not cute alongside the main character, I guess you could say. And that's maybe the difference with Sweet. And I think some of that with Sweet comes down to things like she asks questions. I say she, it's obviously a female voice actor, but it's a slime, so it's probably genderless. So it, will ask questions. It'll ask for things that are very childlike and protective. Did Sweet do a good job? Yes, Sweet did a very good job. Yatai. And I think some of the fallings of Sweet and Fenrir in that show make them enduring. Like, Fenrir isn't necessarily like childlike. I mean, there's a kind of ageless innocence to him where he's just like, of course, I'm a legendary beast that has lived forever. Why have I ever had to care about XYZ? I'm just too proud for it. And it's like, yeah, and you feel like he has good reason to be proud. The show shows he's got good reason to be proud. But I'm comparing Sweet to B, and again, Sweet does things, and they're interesting things. They are things that are just like, even though I normally wouldn't think that a slime eating the meal with everybody else would work, Sweet proves that it does. You just have to kind of make them a human with tastes in slime form, basically. So, yeah, 3 episodes. It's got fresh things it's playing with. It's playing with things that currently are common tropes that I think it's troping for the sake of troping, but I don't know. It feels like we don't have a ton of necessarily good isekai this time, but that's fine. You can't have good ones every time, per se. Fated Magical Princess, Who Made Me a Princess, episode 5. I do feel like it started leaning a bit more into the fundamental premise finally, but maybe just a little bit. It's still a show that at this point I think you're more driven by the non-romance shoujo elements of it. And in that regard, it's enduring. It's neat. I feel like I can continue watching that one easily, but we're way past episode 3, so I think just think that I'm enjoying the episodes, but not necessarily because it's leaning on the fundamental premise of the show very hard, but rather it's moments that I think are chained together by the fundamental premise to a degree, but much better because it's not getting distracted by certain things. I don't know. Fun episode. And then last but not least on this list is My Status as an Assassin Obviously Exceeds the Heroes, episode 2. I'm still not sure what to think about it. I do feel like it's kind of similar to Gatherer's Adventure and Isekai insofar as it has things that it's playing with that it knows it wants to play with, but I don't know if I'm feeling all of them well. There's interesting things in there like the curses and stuff, but I sort of feel like, is there a contradiction here? Because it seemed like there was a setup such that our heroes were told they were summoned to fight the Demon Lord, and that's sort of the purpose, but the kingdom wants to use them to fight war against their country, or 2 or 3 or something. And this episode implies that's the goal, is to manipulate them into doing that. Maybe the Demon King is a far second, I don't know. But at the same time, the events at the end of the previous episode kind of suggests, why did the princess give the guy something that turned a monster into an even more dangerous monster instead of giving him a chance to escape? That still feels a little nonsensical. It still feels like portions of it move forward, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure why the main character trusts that character entirely. I feel like, I don't know. And episode 2 gave us, okay, well, a slime dropped off the ceiling and our main character killed it because, like, what's a slime doing here? But there was an elf in there for some reason, and that seems very weird and nonsensical. Like, I'm sure there's a reason they could explain it by saying that, like, oh, well, you know, she had powerful magic and was able to ward off being digested by the slime for a couple of days or something. But, you know, that's why she was feverish when she was freed, is because too much exhaustion from having done that for too long. And, of course, while she was doing that, she couldn't keep track of where she was going with the slime. And, you know, maybe there's that, but they never gave us that. So we can just put that in there, but it still just feels like, oh, well, our main character's in this labyrinth and he just happened to run into an elf on her own for some reason. Even if they gave good reasons, it still doesn't change the fact that it feels very coincidental. And it's really hard to tell what to think about it. It's definitely got some good budget behind its animation, or at least it feels like it does. Not like the most spectacular budget per se, but enough that it reminds me of other shows, and probably those are shows done by the same studio or something like that. I'm trying to remember the name of that one where the guy could only inflict status and he kept killing things by paralyzing them and poisoning them at the same time. Status effects stuff. And I don't know what to think about it. It is what it is. Alright. That's all the anime I've watched this week. I've been playing Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma. I was about to say Tales of something. I'm like, it's not a Tales of, what is it? A little exhausted. I'm on break this week, so I'm playing it. I'm probably not going to pick up Pokemon Legends ZA. Like, I don't know. I feel like wandering around a city doing Pokemon-y stuff could be okay, but at the same time, I'm like, no, I feel like farming. And I want something cozy, something that I guess I can do at a better pace. And I was a little worried about firing it up, but it turns out it's actually pretty well suited for my level of cozy, where so the only other Rune Factory game I played was Rune Factory Frontier. And I'm not sure how that stands in the grand scheme of things, but there's a lot of things about it that I just really did like. But for me, I think it was too exhausting to play because in order to get through one day, I absolutely had to balance out the Runeys, and that always involved, okay, I have to travel here, I have to collect the right kind, leave it out so I have water Runeys, add water Runeys to the other places so that they stay in perfect balance so the crops can grow well. There's elements of that that are nice, but that one really needed to be automated. That element of it. Otherwise, I don't know. Tiring. For this one, I'm a little less worried about being optimal per se, even though there's some elements of it that kind of encourage you to go down that route anyways. But usually games like Harvest Moon and Rune Factory don't work for me, and I think Stardew Valley falls into this as well, because the gameplay is more centered around, at least the farming part of the gameplay is more centered around time management and energy management. Usually stamina management specifically. So like you can't do everything you would want to do in a single day because there's not enough time. You need to level stuff up so that crops are being automatically watered for you if that's what you're trying to do, or upgrade your watering can, and you know, you're trying to do all that stuff and you can't really just sit down and enjoy the farming part of the game. And I think for Factory Guardians of Ozuma, to a certain degree, the farming was given sort of a backseat to it, but I think that actually successfully makes it very cozy, because in my experience, what you can do is you can go into a development area. That's places where you could place tiles to allow you to grow crops and stuff like that. You can enter the till mode and you're in village developer mode, and time just stops moving in the game. Gives you a lot of time to do everything you want to with the crops, harvest everything you want in whatever ways you want, and rearrange everything, and you can control just how fast time moves through the day to a standstill if you never leave the development zone and never unequip your thingamajig. And I think that does a good job of making it cozy. And the other aspect that helps a lot is difficulty. You can choose between 3 levels of difficulty, and me being somebody who's like, I don't want to focus on combat too much. I don't want to min-max combat. You know, it still doesn't help that there's elements of it where I maybe try to anyways. But I also feel like I can just sort of ignore that to a certain degree and just do other things. Especially around farming and building out the village and organizing stuff. And I don't even feel like I've been leaning too heavily into that. Just mostly, I still feel like I'm building up what it's going to look like in the end. Excuse me. Lots of burps. It's been a really weird week in that regard. So overall, I really do like it as a cozy game. You know, if I had known in advance that you could do that, I might have been less trepidatious about firing it up, I guess. But as it is, I think the timing is fine because it's me going into this. And the truth of the matter is, I spend a lot of time looking at it, trying to think what I want to do. I'm trying to still get a lot out of an individual day, but I really just get to kind of pause the game and look around and say, okay, here's how I'm going to reorganize these crops so they make more sense to the way my crop fields are growing. Oh well. Overall, you know, I've been enjoying it. Is there anything else to talk about? Well, I guess, so I didn't watch Tron Ares, and I'm not really planning to, but it was interesting looking at it and trying to think, what does this tell me in terms of, well, everything Tron. First of all, it doesn't really sound like a great movie. It sounds like it, you know, gets rid of what the previous movie did. It is not very sensical on its own, I guess. But there's also the element of it where I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of Tron Legacy. I wouldn't say that I hated it, but I guess I didn't know what to expect from it going into theaters. And when I did see it, what, I don't know. I guess I was very whelmed, for lack of better words. Not overwhelmed, not underwhelmed, just kind of pulled to the center of, I'm not sure what to think about this. And, you know, I've gone back and I've pondered a bit, and I think I know what it is. And I'm not sure that this is necessarily the right way to go forward with Tron as a franchise. But I think what I really liked about the original movie, you know, going back and watching, it's like, yeah, the beginning stuff is kind of boring. I liked the scenes and the way they were executed. From what I remember, Tron Legacy, it's like there's some showy, fancy things, but I sort of feel like, I don't know, the original Tron's stuff felt like a kind of evolution of what video games were doing at the time, to a degree. Whereas Tron Legacy didn't. It just sort of felt like, here's the elements from the first Tron, but we're upgrading them for neater looking stuff. And that I don't mind, but or that I don't care particularly for. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I don't know, maybe I need to go and rewatch the movie to be sure. But I think the thing that really I didn't care as much about was the first movie has a build up to a final encounter with a very unique character, the MCP, who, you know, we've experienced throughout the thing and we've seen in various forms. And, you know, what can I say about the MCP? Our early introductions are a very interesting voice. Some of the imagery is strange, but that's a good kind of strange, and why does this character feel out of place? And then when you finally see it, it's like, that thing is really weird. It feels like a final boss. Final boss of a video game, final boss of a movie. I don't know. It feels like climatically leads up to that. It's, in some ways, it's kind of similar to Star Wars Episode 4 and the Death Star. But I also feel like that one didn't have a reveal at the very end that was, okay, it's building up to this reveal. That one is just kind of a looming threat with a final, really well executed finale to the movie. And maybe in that regard, Tron Legacy did the only thing it really could do, because, you know, Empire Strikes Back didn't lead up with, all right, let's make more Death Star. You know, they waited until Return of the Jedi to try that. But instead, they kind of raised the stakes by developing all of the characters. And maybe to a certain degree, Tron Legacy is about that, but also maybe to some degree, Tron Legacy is, well, we're playing with something else, which I, for one, not sure if I understood or completely thought made sense, but also thought that that was fine, because I think you're supposed to have this feeling for the unknown that's in there. And there is an element of it where it's about the social elements, and except it's a character that, the main character is a character we'd never seen before. But, you know, that all builds up to, it didn't recontextualize everything you knew up until that point, like Star Wars Episode 5 did. So it can't really be compared in the exact same way. But I do think that there is that element of, okay, we knew we were leading up to this moment that the movie ends with. And it ends very shortly after that. So, you know, from a, you know, you go back to the original Tron, and I know that, you know, I still look at it through my kid eyes, and maybe there's things, but I do feel like there's elements to the way they build up individual scenes that's just actually really good cinematography. Maybe that's present in Tron Legacy. I don't know what I just said. Maybe that's present in Tron Legacy. Maybe not. I haven't seen that since, just to try to kind of analyze it from that perspective. But I can say that from story structure wise, even though the beginning of Tron is kind of boring and it leads up, you know, it clearly led up to something. Whereas I'm not sure I got that feeling from Tron Legacy. And Tron Ares just sounds like it takes a massive dump on everything that came before it. You know, you're kind of standard Disney can't stop shooting itself in the foot sounding sort of stuff. Because not only did it ignore previous stuff, it just kind of shot all over it. It's almost like Alien 3 in that regard, except I'm not sure if it's as good as Alien 3. Which is to say that, you know, for me, Alien 3 is non-canon. Only the first two movies exist. Alien Isolation, the video game, also exists because that one's good execution. There's issues I have with it in the grander lore of things, but nothing big, I would say. Alien 3 had moments that were fun and interesting, stuff that was neat, but I guess it didn't feel like it brought something new like the first two movies did. And I don't mean like new ideas for, here's a xenomorph born from a ox or dog, depending on which version of the movie you saw. If anybody asks which it is, it was both. It just depends on which version of the movie you saw. But the first one not only introduced an iconic creature, but it actually created one of the most realistic slashers out there, even though it's sci-fi. It's just the characters feel a lot more real. And Aliens, while it did, you know, go with stereotypes for a lot of characters, is not only a redemptive arc for our main character, but it's also thematically a story about motherhood. And you can feel that theming through the whole thing, like, maybe not like in the middle of it where you're just like, it's dealing with this, but especially with the director's cut making it really obvious in the beginning. And we really need some sort of halfway cut that introduces some of the scenes from the director's cut, not others that detract from it. I feel like I watched a YouTuber that I was afraid he was going to say, oh yes, this is good because it's really cool. But no, he was right. Yeah, this removes some of the mystery, removes some of the thing, ruins the pacing a little bit. I felt like he did a really good job of summarizing all of it. And I've gotten really distracted, but to me, it doesn't really sound like it's worth my time and energy. And these days, I'm just so exhausted. I don't think I'm taking good care of myself. So, you know, that one's not their fault. But them not making something that I feel like I want to put the energy into kind of is. I mean, one of these days I'll watch these movies I have sitting right there. You know, that's where I've got the second Spider-Verse movie, Sonic the Hedgehog live action movies 2 and 3, things like that. But I sometimes I don't feel like I have the energy for this stuff. Oh well, there we go, my rambling. Hopefully this one was more interesting. You know, because again, while I don't feel like I want to watch it, it's still interesting to go back and see, why did I like Tron? And I'm sure a big part of it is definitely that I watched it as a kid, but I can also see why I liked it and maybe didn't care so much about the follow-up. Oh well, things to think about. Is there anything else worth mentioning? I can't think of anything. So let's end this here. Y'all, have a nice week.